Hello, this is another video from Chris Goldthorpe from chrischess.com, and this is going to be for chess clubs. So we're going to try to keep these videos at about 15 minutes each because it is designed for an after-school enrichment program where we have about 15 minutes of instruction, and then the teacher in the classroom can provide support to students playing practice chess games with each other. So hopefully you have about 40 minutes to work with, and you should get more practice playing than just watching a video. And this is the time when everybody should be paying attention and not having their own conversations like you two in the back there. Okay, so this being lesson number 6, I'm going to assume you've seen the first 5, or that you are familiar with all of the rules of chess. You know how the pieces move, you know how to castle, you understand what en passant is and when it can be used, you understand pawn promotion, you're familiar with the various ways that a chess game could end up in a draw, and you know what check, checkmate, and stalemate are. You know that white moves first. You should have a good idea of the relative value of the chess pieces, and that it is generally useful to get your pieces out. So we're going to go a little bit further today and start talking about how you can try to win against your beginner opponent. And maybe a few things, look ahead toward a few things that we're going to talk about in the near future, some ways that you should not be trying to win, and we'll explain them in greater detail at that time. So let's look at a chessboard, and you should be looking at the chessboard from the perspective of the white pieces no more often than the black pieces, because in half your games you should get used to playing the black pieces sometimes. So the main difference is that when you play black, your king side is over on your left. Because if we take this board and turn it around, see, now your king side is to your left. So good enough that we talk about the position as the white pieces. Now, I believe that some of you are familiar with the idea that we should be playing for the center. And in every group of kids that plays chess, there are some kids who've played quite a bit of chess and they're very familiar with this idea. But even for them, I would say that they need to play for the center even more than they do. Naturally, I would recommend that your first move be a center pawn moving 2 squares forward. Now, we're not going to get into the specifics of which openings to play yet, and if you're going to be a serious player, you may want to consider having a private tutor who develops your individual opening repertoire with you. But the ideas that are going to be common to all openings, whether you're white or black pieces, is that you're going to try to control the center, get both of your knights and both of your bishops out during your first 6 to 8 moves. Get all 4 of them off the back rank, both knights plus both bishops. Every time you move a piece, you would like to move it to a place where it can stay for a while, where it cannot immediately be attacked and have to move back or over to the side, and a spot where it controls some center squares, or at very least some squares close to the center. So you want to control the center, get your pieces out, and castle. So assuming that you know those things, let's take a look at maybe what happens like during a kid's game. Now, since at this level you're looking to get the advantage against what a stronger player would call silly and obvious mistakes, well, when 2 players are both total beginners, those are the kind of mistakes that you see. So if white were to move here, stop the video here and try to find the worst two different moves that black could make. And certainly you would not expect either one of these moves, but if you were the white pieces and you were allowed to make black's move for him, there are two choices here that you might choose. And the answer is, if he were to move his queen to this square or to this square. If you were the white pieces and black now moved his queen here, if you're familiar with how the pieces move, you should immediately see what you would want to do. Same thing if the queen went here. That would be a free queen. Now, players who've had a little bit more experience feel like this is a very silly discussion, and certainly it would be for their level. But these are the kind of mistakes that absolute beginners face when they play each other. So you get to one level before you get to the next level. So suppose black makes a reasonable move here. Every time it's your move, you should pretend that it is still your opponent's move. Look at your king and look at his pieces, especially minor pieces that are on the same color square. Look for moves that could put the king in check. Look for moves that make a capture. Right now, black has not one move that makes a capture or that puts white in check. So we look for ways that black would try to do what he should do. What should he do? He should be getting all of his pieces out. So if you don't see any way for somebody to make an immediate capture or a check right away, then you're just looking for ways for them to get pieces out. Meanwhile, you look for ways for you to get pieces out. For example, this would be a perfectly reasonable move. Now that white has both of these minor pieces out of the way, he's ready to castle. What would be, besides giving away the queen here, what would be a silly move for black? What would be the next worst move that black could make other than to give away his queen? Does he have a move that just gives away a piece in another way? Not that you would expect him to make this move, but if this bishop went here, white would gladly capture it with his knight immediately. And the knight instead of the pawn, because we don't want to have doubled pawns. That's a discussion for later. But in any event, if you captured the bishop either way, white would be overwhelmingly winning. Why would it be a mistake for black to move his knight right now? Because this would be a free pawn. So I'm going to show you a silly trap here. In this case, when it looks like something is free, especially when you're a new player, be very careful, especially if it gets complicated quickly. White could see that this appears to be a free pawn, and from there the knight and bishop would both be attacking this pawn, so white would not only get a free pawn, but he would be threatening a fork. Now when you're new, it's hard to see several moves ahead. But the fact that he moved a piece twice in a row instead of getting another piece out should leave white to be very cautious. Now, if you never saw this before, yeah, it might make sense to think about it, but with a little bit of experience, you learn that this is a bad move. So you might as well see that now. So let's say black goes here. Why? Because he's threatening an unguarded piece and this pawn. So we would have to consider this move, not just because it's a capture, but because it also threatens the queen and the rook. So from there, we would think of this move next. Meanwhile, we're still sitting back here with your knight on f3, and you haven't even decided whether to take this pawn or not. This is like a sequence of moves you might think about. Now this is a very urgent move because black threatens to capture the rook, and that would be not good news for white. I mean, he'd have to bring his bishop all the way back just to stop it from being a checkmate. So we suppose he moves his rook here. Now this is the only move that looks like it makes any sense that is both a capture and a check. Of course, he could take this pawn, and that would be a capture and a check also, but we see the rook can take the queen. And again, that's if you are accustomed to how the pieces move. If he blocks the check in this way, this bishop is now pinned. And this move is check. This move is a capture and a check, so black might, either side might think about that first, but this is checkmate. And rather than to go through all the details of that, to make it simple for yourself, all you need to remember is if black makes this move, don't take the free pawn. Just trade knights here. And then you can do this. And your bishop is guarding that square where his queen might come over here. And both sides have captured one knight, but white has better development. And you've just made it simple for yourself. And you've avoided your opponent's silly trap. So this is not all about this particular trap or attempted trap. It's more about the way you should think in the beginning of the game. Here, your opponent should be getting a new piece out. So if he doesn't, you should be suspicious of that move. But in the beginning of the game, what you need to keep in mind is when you go to make a move, make sure you're not putting the piece where it gives him something for free. Like, for example, if he goes here, he's threatening the bishop. But you don't have to think very far ahead to see that white can now capture this pawn. And if black takes the bishop, then he gets the knight, and white has captured a pawn and a knight for a bishop, which is a good deal for him. So that again would be a silly move when we look at the specific tactics, but the reason why black should have known that that was a silly move is he's moving a piece that's already out. So a much better move would be to get a new piece out. And this is the way we should think. Now this is going to apply to all sorts of openings, whether white starts with a pawn in front of his king or his queen. Also, the bishop can go a long way once that pawn is out of the way, so we should be on the lookout for that happening. Now let's flip the board real quick and go back to the beginning and look at some other silly things that some people do. And we're going to have a class on this specifically later on. When white goes here, what is he threatening to do? Now you can stop the video here and think, imagine that it was white's turn to move. There is only one best move for white here. I mean, I usually say there's no such thing as a best move, but that's for a higher level discussion than this. There is a move that you should see that any reasonable person would consider best here if it were white to move. Now it's actually black to move. But the purpose of saying, what if it were my opponent's move, is to look for threats. So pause the video here if you like and try to figure out what should white do if it were white's move. Okay, he would capture the pawn. So therefore we should go here and guard the pawn. And now he goes here. And again, stop the video if you wish. White has a much better move than capturing this pawn with the bishop. If it were white to move, white has a checkmate in one move. Pause the video and then see if you can figure out what move that is. you should have discovered that if black didn't prevent it, this would be a checkmate. So, rather than to memorize 30 moves of this opening, where both sides play best moves, where white has a very small advantage, very small disadvantage only, but a very strong player is going to beat a weaker player even if they do start with a silly opening. Sometimes beginners go here and they are thinking, if he doesn't see it, I'll capture his queen, and he never does. The queen takes here, and then that's a checkmate. So black should go here, threatening the queen. Then white might go here. Once again, he is threatening to come down here with his queen and make a checkmate. And then you as black should go here. Now we can go into a little bit more detail than this, but one of the reasons I go over this with absolute beginners is this is one way to lose very quickly to horrible moves if you don't watch what you're doing. Black only needs to know these 4 moves. After he plays e5, guard the pawn with the knight, and then chase the queen away with this pawn, and then put this knight in the way, guarded by your queen. So another way that they might try to do the checkmate is to come here with the bishop first. And I recommend getting a knight out. But let's suppose you got this bishop move here, which is actually not a bad move, but now white goes here. And now he seems to have 2 threats at the same time. He's threatening to capture this pawn, but he's also threatening to do a checkmate here. But now, because the bishop is already out, there's nothing wrong with this move at all. To just go here with the queen, and now you're defending both points. And since he's attacking both points with the one and the same piece, it's okay for you to defend with one and the same piece. And that's a minimum. That's really all you need to know about that opening. So when you are very new, rather than to try to memorize long sequences of moves, just try to find out, well, what do I need to know just to get through these first 6 moves without getting clobbered? And that's enough right there. That's all you need to know for defending yourself against a quick 4-move checkmate. So other than that, what you need to know is that what you want to do is get a pawn or 2 in the center. Make no more than 2 or 3 pawn moves. Try to get both of your knights and both of your bishops out there. And then as soon as you've done that, then you try to castle and you try to generally move your pieces forward and toward the center. And you cannot make a plan until you identify a mistake by your opponent. So if they put a piece where you can take it for free or something like that, then you have a way to make progress against them. So in your games today, whoever is helping you should make sure that you try to get both knights and both bishops out early, sooner rather than later. Don't think, oh yeah, I'm going to get them out. No, that doesn't work. If the other person gets a lot of their pieces out first, then you can only get 1 piece out on each move. So if you don't start about the time they do, you'll be behind. And at some point, having 4 pieces buzzing around is going to beat having just 3 buzzing around. This is the reason why it is an advantage to play the white pieces, because white moves first. Okay, so have fun in your games and see if you can make sure that you develop your pieces and don't give away pieces for free. Those are the main 2 things to work on now in this lesson number 6. Thanks for watching, and watch for lesson number 7 coming soon. And be sure to like and subscribe.